Hello and welcome to Common Ground, an inside look at Suffolk County. I'm your host, Seth McCoy, and we have a very special political show for you today. But first, for myself and on behalf of Sheriff Steve Tompkins and the rest of the staff at the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department, I would like to acknowledge the passing of Mayor Thomas Menino, who recently lost his battle with cancer. As the longest-serving mayor in the city's history, Mayor Menino transformed Boston and touched the lives of every one of its residents. He will be sorely missed. Thank you, Mayor Menino. And during our hour-long together, we will wrap up the November 4th statewide election results and discuss their implications. To do so, we have Rachel Kemp from the Massachusetts Republican Party and former Boston City Councilor, John Tobin. I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you and welcome back to the program. Joining me now, Rachel Kemp and John Tobin. All right, let's get right into it. Let's talk about that governor's race. It was, of course, a nail biter. Everybody was up. John, you were saying you were up past 2 o'clock in the morning. 2:15,
that's when Charlie came on to speak. Charlie Bickey came on to speak around 1:30, I believe, 1:30, 20 minutes to 2, yeah.
And so you stayed up the whole way through.
You're a fan of politics, you watch politics, it's like the Super Bowl. Right?
I don't know, I would say Rachel and I are fans of politics as well, but I was in bed by midnight, and I think you were probably in bed before then.
Absolutely. Nail biting is not a good habit, so go to sleep instead.
How did you manage to go to sleep, though? I would have been like, I mean, to me, it seems that you had a lot at stake. You know, you're part of the Republican Party. This was your guy. Didn't you want to stay up?
I did, but there's the next day, and I really had the faith that everything that we've done as a party with the Mass Victory offices, with Women for Charlie, getting a message out that just meant something material and substantive for everyone in the state would be sufficient. And with that, I said, we've done our best, and we will succeed. So
we were both on last night at different times with your colleague Joe Heisler, and I was on, I think at 9:15, and I predicted that Charlie Baker would win, and I was about to get out of the prediction business because you know, like 10 o'clock was just up and down. Right. At one point, 75% of the votes were in, and only 100 votes separated both candidates. I said, I'm not going to make any more predictions again, but he managed to you know, to get it out by the, you know, probably one of the slimmest margins of all time in Massachusetts gubernatorial history.
Absolutely. I mean, it was what, about 39,000?
40,000, 40 votes.
I went to Emerson, so my math isn't very good. No knock to Emerson, but we're not known for our math skills. But I mean, that is an amazingly tight race. I mean, it really could have gone either way. Certainly this morning, Martha Coakley could have said, I want to do a recount. John, why do you think she opted not to do
Well, you get an automatic recount. You get an automatic recount if it's less than, I think it's half of 1%.
Correct.
So I think the way the numbers were playing out at the time, you know, when I think about 95% of the precincts were in, they were saying it would have been, if she'd come within 12,000 votes, that triggers an automatic recount. Mm-hmm. Anything more than that, to do a recount on your own, just takes a massive amount of money, organization. Right. You've already taxed, it takes a lot of volunteers and people and staff who are already overtaxed and overworked. It's a monumental task that, in the end, it's probably not going to yield you know, the difference you're looking for.
And people say this was probably her last attempt at a statewide run, maybe stepping out of politics. Rachel, do you think that that's going to be the case, or do you think we might see Martha Coakley down the line again?
I don't think that we'll see Martha in the same sort of political venue. Mm-hmm. She may do something in the background with one of the state, with one of the party offices. Mm-hmm. But I don't think we'll see her as a political candidate again. Mm-hmm. And I think she wanted to go out with a little bit more grace. Mm-hmm. That's important, right, because she still had to thank her supporters, she had to thank her lieutenant governor. All of that didn't happen last night, and she needed to regroup and go forward and exit with grace.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people were actually talking about that she didn't come out last night to even say to her folks that were gathered downtown that, hey, you know, we're going to wait and see in the morning what the result is. Thank you all for your support. See you in the morning. Any thoughts on that, John?
I thought she should have come down. personally. She's a wonderful woman. She's a nice lady. I know it's a tough race. It's her second tough race in 4 years, statewide.
On a positive note, though, Scott Brown did not win up in New Hampshire. No offense.
Well, we'll get to that, I'm sure. But I think Steve Kerrigan did come down. It seemed, I know Steve. Seemed a tough situation to be thrust into.
Right.
I think for the two of them to come down and say, look, go home.
Yeah.
We're not ready to concede this thing yet. We want to see it through. The indication was even some political consultants, Democrats on TV were saying, look at some of the towns that aren't in yet, that make up that 5% that have not reported, are Republican leaning historically.
Attleboro.
Yes,
where I grew up.
And some of the that's why it's now Republican leaning.
I know.
You moved. So, but even some of the smaller western towns, which are really hamlets,
Yep.
She was going to carry them, but the difference would be just insignificant to make up. So I just think it's important you get people who are there. They've been sitting. They're in that ballroom, from 8:30, and you're projecting to a TV audience. Obviously, when she doesn't come out, the votes were still being tabulated. I can get why it moved past midnight, but Charlie Baker can't go on stage to thank his supporters until
she does
or the party, the Democratic Party, did something. So
well,
maybe
and you have to think for both locations that were in the midst of it all. Both sides are going through this roller coaster ride. 1 minute Coakley's up, next minute Baker's up, and Coakley's down. It's just this whole swirl of emotions for everybody involved. Do you think the AG's office is cursed in terms of running for governor?
Well, there's never been an AG who's won.
Right.
And I think that she really believed she had a clean shot at winning. Not only was this going to be her redemption, but there was a huge emotional factor involved there. And I think her emotions got the better half of her.
John, would you agree with that?
Well, the history would, it's more than a curse, it's reality. I mean, the list is long. I mean, so now it's Martha Coakley twice. It's Tom Riley, it's Scott Harshbarger, it's Jim Shannon, it's Frank Bellotti, it's Bob Quinn. It's just, when you're doing your job as AG, and you're indicting people, and you're fining companies, and doing the job of what an AG does, oftentimes you're angering people. You're not, it's the old adage, that police officers, arrest people and firefighters save people, and it's just people, for law enforcement doing your job. She's law enforcement.
Right.
And it's
well, and I heard that a lot, is that people didn't want, a law enforcement person as the governor, which the same could maybe be said for the mayor's race. Dan Conley, of course, ran for mayor this last time out, and I heard the same thing in that. A lot of people didn't want to have somebody who's a law and order guy as the mayor.
Same way Mickey Roach ran for mayor as coming out of police commissioner.
Right.
Came in 7th out of 8, but 2 years later topped the ticket for Boston City Council.
Right.
So it's not. I mean, the reality is AGs do a lot of good things too.
Yeah.
They protect consumers, and they and rights of people in all kinds of different situations. She's been part of some landmark cases, but sometimes that, unfortunately, for AGs gets overshadowed by the tough work they have to do.
The day-to-day.
That's right.
And you also have to take into consideration that every time you vote, there is this outstanding question. If I were to die today, would this person that I'm electing, would they take care of my family? And if the only thing that you know about them is that they can arrest you, they can put you in jail, there's not that other dimension that needs to be in place.
Do we think that, this is something else that I heard, that the passing of Mayor Menino impacted the race? I'm not sure I buy that. I don't know, Rachel, what you think. If, certainly at the time that the mayor died, the fisherman story was just starting to gain some traction. For folks at home that aren't familiar with the story, it's Governor-elect Baker was talking about the last time that he cried, and he told the story about this fisherman from New Bedford who had 2 sons and kept them from going to college. Nobody knows who the fisherman is or these 2 kids. And that was starting to gain traction, but then, like I said, Mayor Menino passed away, and then that became the story.
I don't think that the mayor's passing, as we're all heartbroken about that, but I don't think that it really had any significant impact on the race. Just as they were trying to gain traction with the pay for play story, where Governor Christie was holding information. no traction there whatsoever. So again, is it message? Is it innuendo? Is it, do you get your facts a little confused? The race is the race.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to change a statewide race in people's minds. People generally have made up their mind. There are very few undecideds on a statewide race, going into the last, few days. We were laughing and kind of marveling, though, at the mayor's funeral. We were talking because we had to go through Secret Service and waiting there for a period of time, and people were talking about that even in death, Mayor Menino's impacting races, just because he took it out of the news cycle, obviously, because the attention, deservedly so, was paid to his legacy and to his passing. So we were laughing about that, he would be impacting it no matter what. But I think I talked to some, well-placed, media people that a lot of that story does check out, actually. The fisherman doesn't want to talk. They may not have been football players, they were wrestlers, they may not be, but it does, they say, pretty reputable people say it does, a lot of it checks out. Whether it would have gained some steam or not, and moved into the weekend is anybody's guess, but I think at that point, people are pretty well decided. But it's just interesting, the mayor's, passing on Thursday, and it's just both campaigns suspended. I think Charlie suspended for 2 days, Martha suspended for 1 day. Get out there that weekend, but it was all the attention was on Mayor Menino.
Absolutely. Today we heard that Governor-elect Baker met with Governor Patrick to talk about transition issues. They met for 40 minutes. Let's talk about what the future of the governor's office might look like, what the governor-elect might be starting to do. What are some of the first steps that he's going to be taking, Rachel? Well,
I think that in his message this afternoon, just before he met with Governor Patrick, Charlie Baker made it very clear that his first step is to find those talented, passionate people to bring to state government to help, one, with the transition, and then the execution of everything that he has highlighted as a policy statement in his campaign. So he's going to be looking for those folks who can drive the economic agenda. He's going to be looking for those educators who understand what it means to really close the gap. And those two factors are so closely linked or aligned to each other, because if we don't have a well-educated population, then they're not able to go on to higher education.
Very true.
Which means that we are supporting and actually advocating for not just a 1 or a 2-tiered economic system, but possibly a 3 and a 4, where there are people who are born into poverty and who will die in poverty. And that's not the American way.
Absolutely not.
Charlie Baker's not going to need a guided tour from any of the Doric dames around the State House. He knows his way around the building, much like Martha obviously does. But he has a knowledge of how, I guess an increased knowledge of how that place works, given the fact that he was with the Weld and Cellucci administrations, was very used to having to negotiate, with a House and a Senate, both dominated by Democrats. He will have, luxury is the proper word, but he comes in. He will have an increased membership. I think the Senate almost doubled in terms of the Republican numbers yesterday in the State House, and added quite a few members of the House as well. So we'll have some more backing there. But I think,
he'll have some backing, but maybe not enough to push through his agenda, which we should talk about that too. I mean, Governor Patrick, when he came into to office, a lot of people thought, oh, it's going to be kind of easy sailing for him, and there was a lot of pushback from the legislature. I don't know if we'll see the same kind of pushback when Governor-elect Baker takes office, but I could see that coming into play down the line.
There's pushback and there's balance. I mean, it's just, it's kind of like in Boston with the city council. That's, they're all the same party as the mayor, but there's pushback from different bodies in the balance and how that works out. But I think, he's been used to doing that negotiation. Is kind of running the show from a financial aspect. For Governors Weld and Cellucci. For a lot of years. So, and, the other thing, I think one of the things I admire about Charlie Baker is, this guy lives in Swampscott and is a business guy and has worked in government. He's got a balance there. I think a lot of people come in just have a business perspective, no government, and they think it's run like a business, and it's really not.
Right.
It's two different things, but he's got that balance. He's guy went out several years ago and ran for selectman in Swampscott, in his hometown, and served as a selectman. And there's no fame and glory in being a small town select person. The money is it's cheap labor. And I was telling Joe yesterday that people I know in Swampscott said, town meetings used to last, or the selectman meetings used to last about an hour before he got there. And then when he got there, the meetings would go to 11:30, 12 o'clock, because it was every line item of the budget was just, and he wasn't trying to bust chops. He was doing his job, and that's what he's used to doing. So he's got that perspective on the local level, the business side, and obviously out of the corner office that I think will serve him well, and hopefully the state well.
Yeah,
and it was really admirable that he ran and won as a selectman in his town, because all of our politics are really local.
Yes.
It's just like you're doing retail site analysis or something. How far can you make an impact? And you have to improve where you live first before you can start to fix somebody else's backyard.
And that's what where you live is where people know you the best.
Yes.
And that, now if he had run for selectman in Swampscott and lost, I would but that's where,
be questionable.
Those are your neighbors, those are the people you see at the coffee shop, you see at the ball fields with your kids, at school. Those are where people know you the best, and you get elected to one of those positions. Sometimes it's tougher to get elected to one of those positions than it is to to a higher office.
Right.
But he's been battle tested in a lot of ways. He's got a lot of work to do. He's got a lot of work to do.
Well, and I was just going to say, there is a lot to be done up at the State House. Certainly, we've all been talking about it for the last couple of years, DTA, DCF. It'll be interesting to see if he can actually come in and clean up the way state government has been running, and make sure that all the services that are getting out there to the right people, and that they're doing the right processes to get those services to the people of the Commonwealth.
Yeah, and with regard to with Martha, I just want to touch on that. I don't think she's going off to pasture anytime soon, or to a retirement home. I think she's got hopefully a lot of life to live, and I just don't see another statewide run in the future. I think that just 2 of those in 4 years, win or lose, just gasses you, and maybe just wants to. I know her husband's retired, and maybe just enjoy things. And I'm sure there'll be no shortage of opportunities, for someone of Martha Coakley's caliber out there. Private practice, or in the party, or a special interest or cause is particularly something she took a real interest in at the AG's office. So I think you haven't heard the last from Martha Coakley. I just don't think it will be an elected office. I had to laugh yesterday because in her hotel suite, apparently they said that Governor Patrick and Mayor Walsh were both with her. And one of the interesting sidelights, in addition to Martha Coakley being on the ballot for governor in Massachusetts the same day that Scott Brown was on the ballot for Senate in a different state, was that Martha Coakley's first run for office as a state rep in Dorchester, she lost to Mayor Walsh.
Right.
I think she came in 3rd in that race, actually. So it's just, it's funny how politics is, and and as time passes, just the different ironies and twists that come about as a result.
Yeah, and well, that's the truth. You never know who you're going to be sitting next to down the line, and your enemy at one point, and by enemy I just mean you're running against somebody, not a real enemy, might be the person you're sitting next to at maybe your best hour or your worst hour.
You never know.
You just never know.
You never know.
The city and the state get smaller every single day.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But going back to the point whether Charlie will be able to really make an impact, there was a very early ad where Governor Weld was talking about how Charlie took charge of the daily meetings at administration and finance. If he brings that same zeal with the talented and the passionate, adding to that, I believe that he will be able to. And again, to your point, he knows his way around. He knows the personalities. This is not something that's new for him. And he knows already where the pitfalls are. So I'm quite sure that he's already come up with a plan, has a strategy.
He's probably ready to go right now.
Just, if he could, he would.
I'm telling you, the time to be, if you're in your 20s and you're talented, the college degree at your back, and you want to be involved in city or state government, today is your day. You have a new mayor who's
Yep.
still putting together his team, even after being in office almost a year.
Right.
Now you have a governor-elect who takes office not till January, but the piece will start to go into place. There's a lot of opportunities out there for young, passionate, you don't have to be young either, but passionate, really people who want to make a difference in all facets of local and state government.
And you shouldn't think that if you're Republican that you shouldn't look to work in that administration. I think that, obviously anybody can work for an elected official. You don't have to necessarily be aligned with them politically, but just throwing that out there.
Well, and Charlie has made the point publicly that working in the administration, working with him, is not just political booty. That he's really looking for the right people for the right positions. And there may be some individuals who are disappointed. That happens in life.
Right.
But the best of the best will be there. And that's what's important to the Commonwealth, because when the governor is elected, he has a fiduciary responsibility to everyone.
Absolutely.
And he's going to do his best.
Yeah, right. And it's that Charlie Baker's name will be on that door, will be on that masthead, is on the ballot. So it's really the decisions are made and the appointments that are made are really. If they go wrong, they come back to Charlie Baker.
Right.
And if they go well, they come back to Charlie Baker. So you want to do them well. And I think he's got a strong sense of this.
Let's talk about his running mate, Karen Polito, Lieutenant Governor. There's been a lot of talk about whether or not we need a Lieutenant Governor. You can debate that probably for a whole show. But what is her role? I don't know, Rachel, if you know, but what are some of the things that are going to be important to her in that role?
Well, Karen's role really is to keep the administration focused on what has been now termed the urban agenda, not forgetting that we have these pockets that are so unique, where you're seeing changing demographics, you're seeing changing cultural mores, and then there are the economic issues, and each one is unique. Springfield is not Boston.
Right.
Boston has 86% of the population of Massachusetts. We generate, somewhere around 93% of the gross state product. Springfield is very different. So it's to keep that focus and to be the eyes and ears of the governor, because he can't be everywhere. But I believe that Karen's specific role will be to support the urban agenda and to keep that alive.
Yeah, I mean, the job of being, people who say that, who snicker and say you don't need a lieutenant governor, and yeah, you do. I mean, Tim Murray was lieutenant governor. He was famous for saying, doing the blocking and tackling. There wasn't full disclosure. I'm good friends with former Lieutenant Governor Murray, and was a proud supporter of his. And I can tell you all the time, there wasn't a time when I talked to him on the phone that he wasn't on his way to some event around the state, and he got around the state and did a lot of that blocking and tackling for Governor Patrick as they worked up with bigger policy initiatives, but really focused and involved in adding more infrastructure, transportation around the state. Some of the needs, working, heading up the Veterans Administration for the Commonwealth. His parents were school teachers, so talking about public schools and public education. The job of governor is not. It's got to be a shared responsibility, and not just by one. You wouldn't put all that responsibility on one person.
Right.
It's like saying the mayor doesn't need a chief of staff or a deputy mayor, or deputy mayors who are in charge of things. It's just it's shared, and they're also the tie-breaking vote on the governor's council for judicial appointments. There was interest. There was one candidate who wasn't on the ballot yesterday, who was running for lieutenant governor, a Democrat, who wanted to abolish the governor's council. Right? Which
You're only
there's some people have different points of view on that, but it would seem a weird thing to be running for if you want to abolish, what kind of the main focus is of the job. But I think there's another person who's no stranger to the building, in Karen Polito. I mean, she served there, right? I mean, so she knows her way around there. She also balances the ticket in terms of gender.
Yeah.
She'll be and has that kind of. So Holliston, right? Shrewsbury. I'm sorry, Holliston.
Yeah.
Shrewsbury, and has that kind of the western part of the state. From a geography point of view, that was always a big asset. I think Tim had, being out of Worcester, and he lived in Worcester, she lives in Shrewsbury, and you have that, you know.
Well, and,
and she's a small business owner on top of that.
Right, and as you mentioned, the balance of just being a woman, so you have that balance out there, which I think is very helpful. You mentioned earlier about the, you know, Women for Charlie. That was a big effort on the part of the campaign.
I think it was probably the smartest thing he did at the beginning of this race. I mean, he made that appointment very early, that pick, and I think it paid huge dividends for him.
Great. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the Attorney General's race, which I think probably had more attention paid to it than a lot of the other races. So we'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Thank you for calling your GED Pep Talk Center. All right, now, are you ready for your GED Pep Talk?
Being nervous is okay. It just shows that you're serious about getting your diploma.
All right, listen, we all need a little nudge sometimes. I don't function without coffee in the morning, but it is going to take more than a double mochaccino to help you here.
A lot of things are scary. Heck, I'm scared of clowns.
No quiero oír. Danny, no lo puedo hacer. Quiero oír. Danny, lo voy a hacer.
DMC, liking your pep talk style.
Just keeping it real, Debs, just keeping it real.
Louder, louder, I'm gonna get my GED, come on! Get your GED. Hey. Can you keep it down, Baba? Thanks.
Whatever motivation you need, we've got a pep talk for you. Get your GED pep talk and find free classes at yourged.org.
Wow, these are really good.
You act surprised. Practice makes perfect.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who don't need perfection. They need you.
So I've come up with a family emergency plan.
Great. What is it?
It's difficult to talk about, so I'm not telling you.
How will we know what to do?
You won't.
I'm so glad I won't have to remember anything.
And me too. Thanks for this, sweetie.
Talk to your kids about who to call, where to meet, what to pack. Visit ready.gov/kids for tips and information.
And welcome back to Common Ground. Of course, if you are just joining us, I want to let you know that Rachel Kemp from the Massachusetts Republican Party and John Tobin, former city councilor here in Boston, are joining me. We're talking about the election that just passed on November 4th. We just finished talking about the governor's race, but we're going to move on to the attorney general race, which, as I was saying before we left for break, I think was the race that people paid the most attention to, maybe not after September 9th, but certainly leading up to September 9th, and then people just assumed that Maura Healey would be the new AG, and of course that is exactly what happened. So, John, let's talk about that race. I mean, you know, Maura came from out of nowhere, basically. She was in the AG's office, decided to ran against Warren Tolman. A lot of people thought that Warren would be the winner in that race, but he was not, and it was Maura. So what are your thoughts on how she came to be the new Attorney General?
Pretty remarkable what she accomplished in that primary, given, you know, I thought at the outset Warren was, you know, clearly, you know, going to be the winner here, given his experience in the State House, given the fact his brother Stephen is, you know, head of the AFL-CIO. How that transfers, you know, in hindsight, how that transfers over to an AG's race, I'm not really sure, you know. But she did come out of nowhere, and it was interesting. I think everybody has to agree that the primaries, both in the Republican, certainly in the Republican side, because there wasn't a lot going on, but in the Democratic side, on these contested races, nobody was talking about them.
Right.
It was probably, I think that the state is hungover from elections. They happen, it's like the orange line. There's a stop every 5-10 minutes, you know. It's just sort of like, and it's just happening, and where it used to be a huge event, it's sort of ho-hum now.
Right.
It's like the Red Sox winning the World Series now. We're used to it. And just just think about in the last couple of years, we've had 2 monumental U.S. Senate races, and Scott Brown, you know, taking, you know, Ted Kennedy's seat, and then 2 years later, Elizabeth Warren beating Scott Brown. 2 races, so much attention on them.
Right.
We had our mayor leave after 20 years, and a new mayor's race, and I mean, so I think from an attention point of view, and people have sort of like been there, done that. The money's been sucked out of everywhere into a lot of these races.
Right.
I think attention started to get turned, but the one person everybody was talking about, the one candidate in any race, they were talking about Maura Healey.
Right.
You could just hear there was a buzz about her.
Yep.
And it became apparent about 2 or 3 weeks out that she was gonna steamroll in that primary over Warren. I will say this. I mean, Charlie hasn't been sworn in yet, but the focus on the Democratic Party, I would think, and I don't have inside information, is going to be on Maura Healey. She will be, you know, she's just her profile. She lives in Charlestown.
Yep.
Her profile is one of such that she's going to be the person I think that people are going to be looking to, because he will get an opponent, obviously, from the Democratic side. There's no doubt about that. You know,
Right.
nobody gets a
free pass.
You know, whether it's her or whether it'd be interesting to see how those two offices work together over the next few years as well. So, yeah, very interesting candidate, and she did well. She did really, really well.
Yeah, and the Republican we should mention was John Miller. Rachel, I don't know if you have any thoughts going in. I know obviously the Republican Party had somebody for every office running.
That was our goal. There was to be no race that was uncontested. And people from nowhere were stepping up and filling those shoes.
Yeah.
So John was another person who decided that he wanted to participate in the public arena, and he came forward. And I think that without a lot of name recognition, that he did fairly well. Should he run again? That's for John to make that decision, but I think he has now learned some lessons that would make him a much better candidate in the long run.
Yeah, 790,000 votes statewide in your first run is nothing to sneeze at.
Right.
I mean,
Exactly.
And as Rachel was saying, I don't know Mr. Miller. He's got quite an impressive resume. But for people, whether Democrats or Republicans or independents or another party, to step up and to put your name on a ballot is somewhat of a courageous act. You know, putting
As
up
you
there.
know.
Yeah, it's not all it's cracked up to be. It seems great when you're talking about it with your family and friends. When you're actually doing it, it's like, oh my God. But you know, good for him, and set himself up nicely for the future. He certainly didn't embarrass himself, that's for sure.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly.
Do you think John's correct in saying that 4 years from now we might be looking at Maura running for governor?
Very likely.
And that's all Rachel wants to say about that.
Exactly.
No, but in all seriousness, congratulations to Maura, because she really just came out and just did it, and it was very impressive.
Yeah.
So, moving on, let's talk.
I just want to add on to that. I mean, you think that you know, when you have a woman at the top of the ballot, and you had you think about all the women who are serving the constitutional offices. And so you think that was going to help, that was going to go top to bottom, that usually the top person would be helping the ones, you know, the bottom or side to side, however the ballot goes. In this case, it might have been, you know, the women running for the other positions who maybe Martha Coakley might have been drafting behind them. It might have gone the opposite direction.
And I think you might be right, because we certainly saw that in the last few weeks, that Maura was going out for Martha, and the other candidates, Auditor Suzanne Bump and Deb Goldberg, even on the local level, Ayanna Pressley was out there, Michelle Wu was out there. I mean, everybody was sort of trying to get people behind Martha. So it was that push, and certainly, you know, Maura was probably front and center on that, trying to get the votes out for Martha.
Yeah,
exactly.
Her star definitely rose in the past couple of months, and it ascended last night. That's for sure.
Absolutely. So Secretary of State, of course, Bill Galvin was on the ballot. David DiArcangelo. We had a green rainbow person, Danny Factor. Galvin ran away with it, definitely. Was there any thought
and he always will.
What are we to say? There's a machine there. It's Bill Galvin.
Right.
He knows what it takes to run and to be successful. And yes, David DiArcangelo was trying to introduce some real innovations in the way that the Secretary of State office does its business. But was that important to people? It's questionable.
Right.
Yeah. Bill Galvin, Secretary Galvin is I call him he's the Bill Belichick of Secretary of States. I mean, he doesn't say a lot. but his actions, you know, he knows the job inside and out.
Right.
Doesn't share a lot with the media, same way Coach Belichick doesn't, but the results are there, and probably nobody knows election law inside and out. You guy could write manuals on it than Bill Galvin, that's for sure.
And again, David D'Arcangelo did not embarrass himself. He did very well. First time running for a statewide office. He should be applauded. David has a unique background. He's legally blind, and yet he was out there every single day running his campaign.
That's terrific.
Somebody was actually talking about him today that perhaps Governor-elect Baker would appoint him to the commission for the blind as a possible. I'm just here. I heard that. It wasn't from any valid source. Somebody just said, hey, that might be an interesting thing for him to do. And whether or not Governor-elect Baker will look at some of the people on the in the Republican Party who ran for office and put those folks into different roles within his administration. So time will tell, of course.
Time will tell.
One of the things I think that people were talking about a lot in this race, which, as you mentioned, John, the only race really that got any attention was the Attorney General's race, as not counting the governor's race. But Secretary Galvin would not go to any debates with any of his opponents. And that was, as you mentioned, that he's the Bill Belichick of politics, where he just, was invited, and David wanted him to go out there and debate, and he just shut it down. And so that's how we got ahead, I think.
I think, I think when you run for office, I don't care what you're running for. I think I understand there are, when you're running statewide particularly, there's so many debates and fora, and it just sort of, they happen a lot, but there are certain ones where, you should debate your opponents. I think you owe that to the voters, and but people make their decisions, and obviously didn't pay for it at the ballot box, but I think it's important. People have to say, I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, we had at Northeastern University, where I am, during the day, in conjunction with El Mundo, the newspapers we sponsored, there was a gubernatorial debate, and it was talk, initially of just having Charlie Baker and Martha Coker, and we said no, you have all 5 candidates there.
Right.
They made it to the ballot.
Yep.
Whether you think they have a chance or not, or whatever the polls are saying, and they earned their right to be there. They earned a seat at the table, for the forum, and it worked out. All 5 candidates showed up. That was great, and.
Should that be for every debate? Because obviously there was some ruffled feathers with the NECN debate where Evan Falchuk was not invited to, or he was invited and then disinvited to that debate. I think
if it's a televised debate, yes, I think all the candidates who are on the ballot should be there.
Absolutely.
And if they decide not to show up, that's one thing, but the invite should be extended, I believe.
Yeah. And not rescinded.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's a voice, and this is we're technically a republic, but we're operating as a democracy, and all of the voices should be heard, and allow people to make an informed decision.
Absolutely. I can't argue with that. One last question on the Secretary of State, Bill Galvin. Is he ever going to step out of office, maybe decide to do something else?
Who knows? I mean, is that his 5th term he was elected to yesterday?
I think
Has
so.
he been in 16 years? They're going for the...
Yeah.
Who knows? I mean, he was in the legislature for a period of time before that too, and so who knows? I mean, I'm sure there's other opportunities for for the line of work that he's in. He does it's more than vote counting as Secretary of State for the Commonwealth, so he seems perfectly content in that. And you hear rumblings every once in a while in the statewide office, and maybe dips the toe into talking about possibly running for governor or a higher position, but it never materializes. So. He seems to be satisfied where he is.
I think you're right. Let's talk about the treasurer's race. We had Deb Goldberg, Michael Heffernan, and a Green Rainbow candidate, Ian Jackson. Deb Goldberg won the treasurer's spot. Thoughts on that race? That was another one that we didn't really hear a lot about leading up to it.
It's interesting with her background. I think for her to be the actual declared winner. Michael Heffernan has been a treasurer. He knows what it takes in order to improve bond ratings, improve the pension plan performance for state workers. All of the things that a treasurer needs to know how to do, Michael Heffernan has actually done those things.
Couldn't you argue, though, that really that position is just a figurehead where you hire the people around you who do that actual work, as opposed to, I mean, Deb Goldberg, I don't think is going to be the one, you know, crunching numbers or doing those sorts of things. She's going to be making sure that her team is out there getting that work done.
You could argue that. However, if you're looking at that pension plan performance, I don't think that you would want to hire someone and to delegate that responsibility. That's something that you would want to be front and center on, and to be able to say, okay, we've improved this. This is how it's going to be better for you. The bond performance, the same thing. You know, having that hands-on responsibility so that at the end of the day, it's, well, that's what happened, is the response, versus this is what we did in order to make things better.
Right.
It's a very different universe.
John?
I think a lot of these times, a lot of these races down ballot become name recognition, certainly. And Deb, you know, ran several years ago for lieutenant governor. I believe may have come in second to that in that race to Tim Murray. So she had a lot of statewide name recognition. Served on the Board of Selectmen in Brookline. You know, Brookline is tiny. Not that that's huge, but she also, you know, a family-owned Stop and Shop for many years. So I think, you know, the Goldberg name has been synonymous with that organization for, you know, for a long time. So I think a lot of those factors, you know, came into play. I think, you know, some of her, you know, commercials where, you know, she started talking about, you know, her family and adoptive children, and out of that, I think, you know, put her over the top. But I think a lot of that time when it gets down that ballot, it just becomes name recognition.
Absolutely.
In a lot of ways.
And I have to say, though, I have a lot of friends who commented to me, some who may not necessarily vote Republican, that they were intrigued by Mike Heffernan and thought that he would be the one who could do the best job. Whether or not they voted that way, I don't know, but it's just interesting to note that people did see a difference, at least in the people that I was talking to, with what her experience is and what his is, and who would bring what to the table.
Those races, those treasurer races, always get a little close. That was a little bit closer, I think, than people thought it was going to be.
55% to 41%.
It happened with Tim Cahill too several years ago, where he'd won the tough Democratic primary. People thought he was going to cruise, and then it came down to the wire. You know, on election night, it was a real close race. So you just can never tell in some of these down ballot races.
And again, I think that there was this feeling that if Charlie and Karen carried the day, that the wave would carry everyone else to success. So, you know, good commercials, good ads, substantive message, little light on the name recognition.
Right.
Second time, perhaps.
Yeah, perhaps. And I think, you know, what you mentioned, you might have had Democrats who were going in and not necessarily voting for Coakley, but then as they went down the ballot, went back to voting for their Democratic people.
Exactly.
So, State Auditor, Suzanne Bump, Patricia St. Aubin, and M.K. Marilise were the candidates. Suzanne Bump won re-election. Again, another race that not a lot of people were talking about. There were even polls out there. You know, David Bernstein did a couple where they didn't even mention this race. It was, you know, who do you think is going to win? And it would have the governor and treasurer and AG, and then that would be it. And there was no real mention of this race whatsoever. Are you surprised, John, that Suzanne Bump won re-election?
No, I think once she's the incumbent and served in the place beforehand as a state representative, as you said, I think it's when you're in those kind of constitutional offices that aren't governor or, you know, high profile, and you're there, it's very tough for someone to the best time to get somebody is their second term, and then after that it's very, very difficult to you know, to defeat them.
Right. Even though, again, Patricia St. Aubin is actually an auditor.
Well, she was, but she doesn't do the auditing that the auditor's office
Exactly.
does. So that, I think, was the difference in, you know, going out there and talking about auditing books versus what the auditor's office is doing now. you know, certainly a lot of people don't even really know what the auditor's office does, let's be honest.
But I think that Patricia and the way she campaigned, she highlighted that. She highlighted some things that Suzanne Bump just signed without even looking at them. And so those were some significant issues that she was trying to build some pushback to give her some space in order to really campaign. But again, as a first-time statewide candidate,
yeah, all the Republicans,
she did well.
Yep, 38% of the vote, over 752,000 votes for Patricia St. Aubin. And again, all the Republicans, as you've been mentioning, did very well first time out. So that says something. John, thoughts on that, just overall?
Yeah, I just think a rising tide lifts all boats. I mean, I think that the success of Charlie Baker and Karen Polito, you know, the relative success of these first-time candidates, you know, there just hasn't been a farm league in the Republican Party for a long time. Right. And I think much like I think Governor Patrick gave his election gave more inspiration to people of color from Boston for running for state representative or state senator, kind of inspirational. That has happened, and I think you'll start to see. I think rather than be discouraged by these results, I think they'll be empowered by that. Perhaps come off the ballot there, and the next time around, run for a local seat, run for a state rep seat, or
you bring up
a
good point about a farm team. I mean, it seems to me, and maybe I'm just blinded by Democrats all around, but it seems to me that there isn't that farm team necessarily for the Republican Party, and that might be something that you guys are looking at, not just, and obviously, all these candidates came out and they're Republican, but looking to a younger generation to come out and kind of build them into candidates.
And that's what happened. I mean, we had John Chapman, we had his wife, or Fatman, and his wife. There's the next generation is already coming. And I think that the Mass GOP as a political entity has learned some significant lessons over the short term. We have to be out there. We have to be engaging with the people that we expect to run. And we have to be training them how to run. So it just doesn't happen overnight. But the wave is already moving, and it's going to keep moving.
I don't think Charlie Baker probably did as well in Boston as he hoped for, but he sure spent a lot of time in the city of Boston and won over some converts, and spent a lot of time in communities of color. Something he probably didn't do enough of. I think he would be the first one to tell you, 4 years ago. A lot of it's about showing up. And showing your interest and your care, and he won over some converts, and I think that will pay. Even if some folks didn't vote for him this time around, I think they'll watch closely, and those are people that he could turn 4 years will be definitely with him in a public way.
I live in Roxbury, and certainly if you had asked me 4 years ago if I thought I would be seeing Charlie Baker signs in my neighborhood, I would have been like, no.
Take some aspirin.
And they were there.
They were there, yes they were. But again, it's about building that platform. If you don't have the infrastructure, it's not going to happen. And there were some emotional touch points that happened that were purely coincidental. The Urban League barbecue. When the music is playing, it's My Girl, and all of a sudden Charlie has that moment. And people were like, oh, look at that.
Right.
It's that humanizing touch.
Right, yeah.
People want people they can vote for that they can relate to.
Yes.
They don't want to vote for androids or robots. They want to vote for people. I'm not
that
saying
you
should
hang
go out
out
there.
with.
I'm not saying you should go out there and be juggling fire or doing comic impersonations, but they want people they can relate. They want to know who they are.
Right, absolutely.
And they want to relate to them. And like you said, it's the old "would I have a beer with them" test. And I think he learned a lot from 4 years ago.
Now, despite all these other races, probably the most important race of the night was the Suffolk County Sheriff race. I'm just saying that. So Sheriff Tompkins won re-election handedly. His opponent was independent Hassan Smith. Thoughts on that race? Obviously, Sheriff Tompkins, this was his first time actually running for office. He had been appointed to that position when Andrea Cabral left for the administration. John, any thoughts on that? the best race of the night.
Oh, absolutely. The sheriff's race, the most important race of the entire. I'm sorry we didn't lead off the show with it.
I know.
I mean, look, Steve, Sheriff Tompkins was there with Sheriff Cabral when she came in, and inherited some issues there that that she had to clean up and help rectify. When you're sheriff, there's another example. You're not always. You're never you're most popular for sheriff the day you get elected,
right.
And then it goes all downhill from there. But she did her job. Steve Tompkins got the appointment, filled the rest of the term, had that advantage, obviously, filling the term.
He's got great ideas,
I wouldn't call it a spirited.
And I'm not just saying that because this is a show.
And I think that really makes the difference. Right. Regardless of party affiliation, Sheriff Tompkins really has been able to not only articulate some good ideas for breaking that prison to pipeline, but to really embrace the community and not be a distant person, but be a part of the community where they can see him, they know if there's a problem, he's approachable. That helped so much.
Absolutely.
Sheriff Tompkins is much more than just a sheriff or someone who worked in the sheriff's department previously. He's someone who's really involved in his community in a lot of ways and paid dividends. He had I wouldn't call it a tough preliminary, but a spirited one.
Doug Bennett. We're going to run through the ballot questions really quickly because we are definitely running out of time. But question number 1 was the state gas tax, whether or not it would adjust with inflation. The yes vote was the successor there, which means that it will not be based on inflation, if I'm saying that correctly, right?
Well, it won't be tied to that index.
Right.
The gas tax still exists, but every time the legislature wishes to raise our taxes, they will have to let us know.
Ballot question number 2 is expanding the beverage container deposit law. This failed. A lot of people knew that this was not going to pass. People apparently don't want clean streets. I'm passionate about all the litter on the streets, and I had wished that the bottle bill had been expanded. Sadly, it was not.
When you bring, I mean, the bottle industry is
very
massive
powerful.
and very powerful, and a lot of that interest, came in. I'll just say this about the ballot. I know you're not done with them. There's 2 more to go, but the ballot questions, it in a lot of ways takes the legislature off the hook. In a lot of ways, and if we're gonna, why don't we just put everything on the ballot? I know it takes time to get on the, but now you're paying for signatures, and it's become like a cottage industry.
No. For ballot question 1, those signatures were not paid for.
There was one. That's right. There was one that wasn't paid for. But I'm just talking about in general, right? A lot of them are paid for, and it just becomes this sort of, like I said, a cottage industry that gets created.
So just real quick, because I have one final question, but question number 3 was expanding the gaming, and that gaming will happen here in the Commonwealth. Unfortunately, that's my own commentary there. And earned sick time did pass, but my final question for both of you is, when is the next special election? Rachel?
I have no idea.
Well, it'll probably be in February or March, because I would guess that when Charlie Baker and Karen Polito are out there looking for talent, and Maura Healey's looking for talent, that some of that talent's going to come from people who hold elected office, who are state reps and state senators. So probably before the show is over, we'll have an idea of the next special election.
Well, I always wait until the election commission tells me, so that way I know for sure that we're having a special election.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you both for being here tonight, Rachel and John. It was a pleasure talking about all the stuff that went on last night.
It was a great conversation. Thanks, Seth.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
And that's going to do it for us here. We will see you next time. Good night.